Hello, and welcome to episode 292 of Sutton Impact Family Style. I'm Jason, and I'm not joined by my dad today. I'm joined by my good friend Fred.
Hey, Jason. Thanks so much for giving me this chance to be on with you. Really appreciate it.
Despite you being a New England fan, which is annoying, but we.
Well, I do have to say, like, yes, I am a New England fan, but, you know, tried and true, right? Like, I've been through the good times, but also very much through the bad. So, like, my favorite player was Steve Grogan growing up, when they were 2-14. 2-16, like when they were horrible. So, I will say I feel like I kind of earned it a little bit because I, stuck with them throughout.
It's hard to
If that
argue
makes
that,
any
yeah.
sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, it does.
So, but yeah, I grew up out in Massachusetts, out near Western Massachusetts. So, been thankful that the recent 20 years has been an amazing time for the sports around here. But because of how I grew up, I also kind of do have like a big time place in my heart for all the underdogs. So I'm still kind of like a Cubs fan because they were just so bad for so long. Found myself rooting for them. Kind of like the Lions because they are bad for so long. So it's kind of a weird thing being a New England fan forever because you do kind of pull for those teams that just suck.
Yeah, that makes sense. But you guys have had between the Celtics, the Red Sox, the Patriots, and not really the Bruins. Did they win a chip in the 20s, 2000s?
What's what was the question?
Did the Bruins win a cup during the last 22?
Oh no! Oh yeah. They won.
Yeah, they did, didn't they? Yeah.
They won one because there was the goalie at the time, Tim Thomas, who like made a big political statement of not going to the White House. So yeah.
Yeah, so you guys have had NBA, NFL, multiple NFL, Major League Baseball, and NHL hockey. That's a really nice 2 decades of New England
I
fandom.
really can't complain. Like even though the Patriots are certainly not a contender this year and probably not for the next couple of years, how can I be upset? Like maybe that's a horrible way of looking at it, but like I'm still kind of like in the glow of 6 championships in 20 years.
Well, as we get started on New England, let me ask you a New England, or start on NFL. Let me ask you a New England question that everyone talks about in stupid sports media. Are you a Zappy or a Mackey?
Well, I'm a big fan of Max. I just like I feel like anybody who walks in and has to take over for a living legend. I mean, you're just destined to fail. So I've always kind of rooted for him. But the truth of the matter is, like when you look at the two quarterbacks, there is a significant difference in terms of just their like demeanor
Yeah.
and maybe it's just who they are personally. But when I'm looking at my quarterback, I want to see a guy who's like, we're gonna effing do this, right? And if you watch Zappy, even being in his first season, being a rookie, really knowing nothing about the NFL, he just has a swagger about him that I would think if I was a guy on the offensive line, and I see this guy coming out, and he's just walking out with like this kind of sense of like, we can do this. That's the guy I'm pulling for. Whereas you see Mac, and he just seems so unsure of himself and not sure where to, look with his first read, where to go. He just seems to be so indecisive that, if I'm going strictly from being a sports fan and wanting my team to do well, I'm going with Zappy because of what I've seen in terms of, the level of success he's had obviously is a no-brainer, but just in terms of the intangibles that I see between those two guys, that's the way I would lead.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because I thought that was part of Mac's appeal last year. Is that Mac had, sort of the swagger. Because there were even guys like Chase, or not Chase, some of the guys he played with at Alabama that were like, Mac's my guy, not Tua.
Yeah, you're right.
And you thought Mac was like the new, like, because Tom Brady always had that swagger. I mean, as a Steeler fan, that's the one positive Kenny Pickett has shown this year, is that he seems to have the swagger. Nothing else,
if
but
your quarterback, if the guy leading your offense doesn't give you the sense that he has any faith in himself, then who the hell else is following him? Like, that's one of those positions where you definitely have to fake it until you make it.
Oh, without a doubt.
I mean, you can have a bad game here and there, but like you can never question or like show people that you're questioning your own ability or your ability to execute the offense or find the right read or check out of a bad call. Like you just that's a hugely important thing. I think that it's really interesting to see how that's played out in New England this year.
Yeah. Okay, so we figured we were trying to change it up a little bit. So we're going to do the 3 things we've thought about most this NFL season that have nothing to do with our favorite teams. So you don't have to hear me rant about Kenny Pickett and Matt Canada, and we got our New England talk in. So I'll go first with my big positive one. Across the state of my favorite NFL team is the Philadelphia Eagles. And they are 8-0, but I just love the continued Jalen Hurts story. Because you look at him in college, he was the starter at Alabama, got replaced by Tua, sat on the bench while Tua went and did everything. Tua got hurt. Hurts came in, played great, was the perfect teammate, realized he wasn't in place next year, went to Oklahoma, played well at Oklahoma. He's in the NFL, and people look at him as like, a gimmicky run quarterback that can't really throw, and he's been fantastic this year. I mean, my biggest regret is not taking him off your hands last year in fantasy when you offered him to me for almost nothing.
Yeah, you could have had him for
Edwards-Helaire. Yeah. I know. But I really like Jalen Hurts, and it's nice seeing that sort of rise,
Yeah, I agree. I think it's awesome to see. Do you think he's as successful as he's been, at least at the beginning part of his career, if he didn't go through what he went through at Alabama with getting benched in the championship game?
No, I'm sure that humbling probably helped him quite a bit, But it seems like, you hear all these stories about, gym rats and hardest workers. And in professional sports, that's somewhat silly because everybody there, for the most part, is the gym rat and works really hard. But you see somebody that wasn't supposed to be this good, and he's just gotten better and better and better every year. Now they're sitting at 8-0. He's making plays with his hands, his feet, his arm. Like, and they're sitting at 8-0. And it's hard to imagine, I guess on paper, if you're looking at records, Minnesota is somehow the second best team in the NFC, but I can't get behind it,
Yeah, it's the standings all across the board, NFL and even not to convolute things, but even NBA, like everything is just kind of a little bit crazy, with maybe the exception of the Chiefs and the Bills being at top. But I agree, like NFC wise, the Eagles and the Vikings being like your top 2 teams, followed third by the Seahawks, which would be a segue into kind of my biggest surprise, which would be the whole Geno Smith experiment, which has some similarities to what you're talking about with Jalen Hurts. It's just that his took like 13 years. And
yeah.
I can't think of anybody else who's stuck through the league so long to reach the level of success that he's had this year. There's been plenty of times where there's been young guys like Hurts who come through and surprise people and kind of continue to get better and better and better. But it seems like, with Geno Smith, he was kind of like, forgotten, expected for dead for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
How does this guy like come out of nowhere and all of a sudden he's in a great fit? And I think it's actually a really cool story. Again, it goes back to that whole kind of underdog thing. I was never really a big fan of him. I think he went to West Virginia in college. Wasn't necessarily like, when the Jets drafted him. As a Patriots fan, I was excited because I was like, okay, this is going to be another disaster for them. But again, with all that he's been through, and his willingness to continue to kind of grind, much like I think of a Tyrod Taylor, same dude. Like they're dudes that you root for because they've been through so much, stuck with it, and just looking for an opportunity. And now, given this opportunity, he's like knocking it out of the park. I think it's one of those things that going into the season you would have never guessed, and it's just been really fascinating to watch.
Completely.
Yeah, I think both of those quarterbacks are, just great stories, for their different reasons. I agree. I think Hurts is one of those guys that I just, um, you know, it just seems like everything about him is quality dude. And having recently just seen an interview with Geno Smith, like, get the same kind of thing. But much like you had mentioned with Jalen, most likely that humbling process through Alabama helped him get to where he is now. I think that Geno Smith, he even talked about like going through what he went through, gives him a perspective that probably not many other players in the league have.
No. And I guess my second one is somewhat related to both the things we just said, which is right now the Seattle Seahawks are in first place. The Rams have 3 wins. In the NFC South, the Falcons are in first place. Not the Buccaneers with Tom Brady, not the Saints, who I foolishly picked to do well. I know I'll live that one down. The Packers are 3-5. I mean, seeing the Vikings at 6 wasn't shocking, especially when the Giants are 6-2 with no receivers, and that's just incredible coaching. And you just the Tennessee Titans are once again in first place, and all those other teams are terrible, including Indianapolis. You look at, I mean, it's the Bills are like the Jets who were playing the Bills right now are 5-3. Like it's just been a crazy year. I don't know what else. I mean, I stopped gambling after week 3 because I'm like, no, I'm out.
Is this, finally are we starting to see what the NFL has been seeking for all this time in terms of like talking about parity? And maybe it was just on hold for a little while because of the Patriots run. But now, that was the whole point of putting in a salary cap, was to try to make sure that there was this sense of kind of parity. And I think the last 2 years have actually been my most enjoyable NFL seasons to watch.
Yeah.
Even though the Patriots have been out of it, like, you never know what's going to happen these last couple of years. There's craziness throughout. There's so many good games because there's so many teams that are competitive, and I actually think that's fun. But to your point, it is crazy when you look at the standings and you're like, who?
Yeah. I mean, the Giants are 6-2. They've started like 15 different wide receivers. It's Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, and some incredible coaching. And again, the Falcons, they're 4-4 with Marcus Mariota at the helm, and 30-year-old Cordell Patterson is your running. Like it seems like teams that have an identity and good coaching, and again, Seattle falls into this category, just play really well. Like that's you have an identity, you know what you're doing, and you just go out there and win football games. So yeah, that's it. It's just been bizarre. I mean, I've been off on all my picks this year, so.
Yeah, I was keeping track on some ESPN league of just doing like weekly picks, and I was, I think, in the low 60s, and I was ranked really, really high because it's just been such a crazy year. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the standings, when you look at them, it's exactly the opposite of probably what we would have expected, right? Like the AFC West, maybe is more chalk, but in terms of like their overall record, we thought that was going to be the best division. It was thought that was going to be the best division of football.
Yeah, I did.
And you look at the overall record of that division, I think it's probably right around 500. As a group, all 4 teams, if you took the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Raiders, if you took their records collectively, I think they're right around 500. And then you look at in the AFC East, which, I expected the Patriots to be middle of the pack, Dolphins to be middle of the pack, and the Jets to be horrible, and the Bills to be really good. But I thought that was going to be the weakest division in the AFC, and in fact, it's the exact opposite. And same with the NFC. You look at the NFC West, and I was like, okay, the Seahawks are going to get 1 win and get the first pick of the draft, going into the beginning of the season. And then it's going to be, a toss-up between the 49ers, the Rams, and the Cardinals. All those teams are going to be, like, going into the playoffs. Again, the exact opposite. So, I agree with you. It's It's been totally unpredictable, but a lot of fun as an NFL fan.
Yes.
Yeah. I think one of the other big surprises is, for me, it's kind of, I guess, the whole bounce back thing, right? Like, you see it over and over again. But you look at these teams like the Washington Commanders. You look at the Bengals. You look at these teams that really had crazy rough starts and have been able to kind of bounce back. It fascinates me how, people who are far smarter than me when it comes to the NFL break down the season into, seasons within the season.
Yeah.
Every 4 weeks kind of being like, first quarter, second quarter, and how the game changes, with the change of weather, as teams start to get a book on you and start to be able to kind of plan better. But even to what you're talking about, like, identify what their identity is and then really be able to push on that. For those two teams that I mentioned, like the Bengals and the Commanders, they're coming at it from two completely different spots. I mean, they're both 4-4 right now. Neither one is out of, not so much a surprise that the Bengals are still in the playoffs. I think we all kind of expected that. Commanders, not so much, but they're definitely, with a 500 record, well within range of making it to the playoffs. But that's only because, this Heineke guy comes in, and suddenly now their offense is going crazy, even though they don't have a run game. Some of their essential guys, like Gibson, who was their running back forever, just pound and pound. He only plays on third down now. So they're changing up what they do. But they're bouncing back from, I want to say, what they said, 0-3, maybe 1-4, something like that. I think they've won 3 straight games. And, with the Bengals, they had such a rough start to the season, and everybody was counting them out. Sophomore slump, they lost the Super Bowl last year. Teams that lose the Super Bowl always come back and have a bad season.
They lost to my Steelers to start the year.
A really tough AFC. So I think, again, those teams that are kind of quickly counted out, but still seeing the course, it is pretty interesting.
Yeah. And then I guess the last thing I was thinking NFL is they're estimating the Washington Commanders, who we're finally going to sell, it seems like, are going to go for $7 billion. So
is that that's what they're saying now?
Yeah.
$7 billion?
That's a lot of monies. It's a whole lot of monies. So,
Man. Okay, so now, is it... it's you hear so many stories about Dan Snyder, and, regardless of whether or not you try to reserve judgment, it's impossible if you're following any of this, not to, develop an opinion one way or the other. And it's almost impossible, I believe it's almost impossible not to develop an opinion that he's not, the best man on the face of the planet. And it's hard not to almost be bitter to a certain extent that the dude's going to be rewarded with $7 billion. I don't know what he bought the team for, but that's crazy.
Yeah. As the Wu-Tang Clan once said, dollar, dollar bill, y'all, money cash rules everything. And it just does. I mean, you got money, you can pretty much buy your way out of anything. But yeah, he's going to get rewarded. And it was interesting. So when he basically was blackmailing the rest of the owners in the NFL, being eventually denying the people watching them. But, it's tough.
I know. I did read about that or heard about that somewhere where he had supposedly hired PIs to follow around some of the different owners. That's creepy stuff.
But, you look at Nixon and other people in power, and that's, that seems to be hard for the course. It's not a great lesson for the youths of America. But switching to the other football, the college football, we had a pretty big day yesterday. Because Georgia knocked off Tennessee. So Georgia is clearly the number 1 team in the country. And then LSU gave Alabama 2 losses. So we might not have Alabama even contending for a playoff spot, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody about that this morning. Like and I use that exact same terminology. It's exciting to think that they're going to be out. Much like, again, kind of going back on the roots. I fully understood why people, were rooting against the Patriots every year because they got in the Super Bowl, 9 out of 18 years. Every other year they were there. It's kind of like the same thing. I'm on the other side of things in terms of the Alabama thing. Like them being in one of the 4 teams in the playoff every single year. It's just you're rooting against them unless you live in Alabama.
Yeah, and I mean LSU has 2 losses, Alabama has 2 losses, Tennessee's now got the big loss. So Georgia looks like they win and they're in. The winner of Ohio State Michigan is in. Clemson somehow got smacked by Notre Dame yesterday. So they were already. It seemed like they were going to skate in by being Clemson and being undefeated, but they're not anymore. So now it opens the door for TCU, Oregon, USC. And I guess you can't count Old Miss out technically because they play everybody in the SEC still. So, but again, I'm not celebrating the loss of Alabama, but just that it's nice that maybe they're not going to be there this year.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and credit to Saban and his coaching staff. I mean, well, which has been quite honestly, right? His coaching staff itself has been kind of like a turnstile, right? Like they have people in and out seemingly every year. Going into his coordinators are always taking jobs. Other college programs or even in pros. So it is fascinating how successful he has been, dominant, really.
Incredible, yeah.
His program has been for such a long period of time. But it is refreshing. Do you think that that change is sparked by the changing landscape and culture of college sports? Just they had it down here.
I don't think this year it is. I mean, I think NIL is going to continue to push players towards I think USC is going to benefit in all the schools we talked about. Miami, all the big city schools.
Yeah.
I think this year Alabama they don't have as much talent. I mean, they've been putting 3 wide receivers in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft every single year. And they don't have that this year. They don't have a running game this year. Their offensive line isn't as dominant. I mean, they just, they're still an incredible program. It's just, I think at some point, unlike the pros.
Yeah, and I guess, to that point, it makes complete sense, right? Like, if you're going to continue to have your, much like I was mentioning with coaches, but if the talent on the field is being pulled from you, they're almost like, they're not, obviously, they don't have one and done in college football, but it seems like they're almost as close to a version of that as we've seen, because it's like guys are stars and then next year they're so, but they've been in the program for 2 years before that. So, but yeah, I watched some of that game. I was actually kind of surprised, seeing like Will Anderson touted as this guy who's like just going to be dominant. And granted, he got in the backfield almost every single time, but I don't know if I saw him actually make a tackle.
No,
so
they.
I was thinking like that might be part of the problem, But yeah, I think out of those other teams that are going to be vying for it, I think Oregon probably has the best shot. They had their big loss at the beginning of the year, but since then, like Bo Nix has really been off the charts.
Yeah, he has
for the most part, and they might have 1 or 2 competitive. I don't have their schedule in front of me, but they might have 1 competitive game left in the regular season, and then they'll have the Pac-10 championship. So I would definitely say that that would be a team that would be looking at that 3 or 4 spot.
Yeah. I mean, before we move on to our other exciting talk of the NBA, I guess we should acknowledge that Major League Baseball crowned a champion yesterday, right?
Yeah, probably so. It is funny, and I will say, like, I was actually really pulling for Philadelphia.
Of course.
It's kind of a weird thing to say, but it's just thinking about it. 6 or 7 months ago, I think Philadelphia is actually the city that is closest to like Boston from a sports standpoint. Like,
Okay.
we both have kind of like a checkered past in some way. We got 4 teams. We got one team for each of the 4 major sports. Really passionate and ravenous sports fandom, but like one that can be really critical and over the top, really, really tough.
Yeah.
I think of a lot of other sports towns, and they're all, they root for their teams, but I don't find them to be as critical and judgmental as some of the Boston fans are, and Philly kind of stands out. But so it is interesting. But I was pulling for the Phillies, and yeah, the Astros just were too much. Verlander is amazing, 39 years old, 2 years post Tommy John surgery, and the guy was like dominant, throwing 96, 97 miles an hour. I don't even know how that's possible.
Yeah. No, I mean, despite the cheating, the Astros are obviously a very well-run organization. And, it is weird that we say this every year when I'm on the podcast with my dad. My dad still loves baseball, but I think once Little League was over, that was pretty much the last time I paid serious attention to baseball. And
yeah, baseball for me is like hockey. You get into the playoffs and I'll start to watch it. But, regular season is not. I can find 100 other things that I'd rather spend my time doing. It is. You almost feel like that's not being loyal to sports as a sports fan. You'd think like supposed to root for all these or be involved in these different things, but I don't know if it's the time of year where there's just a lot to do up here. I was, suddenly it's nice outside. Last thing you want to do is be sitting watching the game. But it is such a boring game. And I don't know that they're taking steps to speed it up, but I don't know if they're ever going to be able to make it, compete in terms of watchability with some of the other sports. Like, things that the NBA certainly has done to try to make the game more enjoyable.
yeah, I made this point before, but, as a video game person, right now, MLB The Show is incredible. Like, people walk by your TV, they think it's a real game. There's so many options of how you can pitch, how you can hit. You can play, a simple button like old school. You can make it very difficult. I love video games. I haven't played a baseball. It's free, and I don't even play it. Like, even as a video game, it's just not as exciting as other sports games. And then sometimes I wonder, too, like...
How do you fix that? There's no way to fix it unless you're going to, just the game in itself is inherently a much slower paced game, and there are people who love it, but it's a different watch, right?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is like the only team I paid attention to probably in the last 3 or 4 years is the Savannah Bananas. Are you familiar with them?
I caught one of their games and was in hysterics. It was the first time I actually enjoyed watching baseball.
But to be fair, like the Savannah Bananas is like putting as much frosting and decorations as they possibly can on the game. But because they're dancing, they have all sorts of stuff going on in the stands constantly. It's obliterating your senses with stimuli. But it's not. But that's what it takes to get me interested in baseball. It's probably not the best sign.
Right, yeah, because it is crazy all the different things that they did, and I know that anybody who is a historian of baseball or a lover of baseball for a long, long time would watch that and probably throw up in their mouths. Right?
Probably a little bit, yeah.
But it is such a the game that I was watching, the center fielder was sitting in an Adirondack chair.
Yeah.
For the whole time he was out there. And I was just like cracking up with, random, crazy, stupid things like that. But they had a second base coach. I thought that was a riot. It was just fun stuff like that.
Yeah, but to basically, I know it's done out of love, but on some level, like mock the game the way that they do to make it enjoyable is really probably the worst sign for baseball possible.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it because it is kind of a mockery of baseball. There's definitely. And what's the deal with them? Supposedly they go around and just like play different legit AAA teams. Yeah,
they're sort of like old school, like in the 1930s and 40s with the Barnstormers, where they would just load the team up on a bus and just travel the country playing games. That's pretty much what I mean. They're not dissimilar from the Globetrotters for people if they,
Ah,
that's probably the closest thing is that they do in another sport where the Globetrotters, they play NBA teams sometimes.
yeah, that's a great analogy. I want to put those together, but I think you're right on.
Yeah, but again, that's if I had a child, like I would bring them to Savannah, that game because I feel like they'd be like, oh, this is cool, this is fun, I like baseball. And then I'd go to another game and they'd be like, what happened?
Right, and then you bring them to an Atlanta Braves game. And they're like, "Hey, listen, what happened to the game that I enjoyed much?"
Yeah.
That's funny.
Well, we talked about NBA for a second, so let's go to NBA.
Yeah. Okay. Getting into NBA, if I was to ask you, like, this just kind of goes to our central theme of some of these sports being really unpredictable. If I asked you, can you name one of the three top 3-point shooters this far into the season? If you name one, I'll give you $100 if you can even come up with one of them.
My first pick would be Kevin Herter.
Okay. No. Once I mentioned that I was going to give you $100, I kind of got nervous. But no, it is not Kevin Herter.
Oh, I thought you said a nice year. Okay.
I'll give you a second guess for $50.
Oh wow, this is tough now. Let's see. Thinking about the teams that are doing really well. I don't want to waste time, so I'll just throw one out. Darius Garland.
No.
Okay.
No. Leading the league in 3-point efficiency or percentage is Kelly Olynyk.
Ooh.
With Utah Jazz.
The 7-3 now Utah Jazz, who were supposed to be tanking.
So, and then second is Sam Hauser of the Boston Celtics bench. I don't know why he's getting run and why he's getting minutes, but he's out there and he's lighting it up from 3. And then Grant Williams from the Celtics as well is number 3. Like, those are the top 3 guys in 3-point shooting in the league. Like, it makes no sense.
No.
Speaking of no sense, if the season were to end right now, which is like my least favorite thing, I just haven't tried it.
Because we are 9 games in for everybody listening and not paying attention.
But the fact that the 76ers and the Heat are under 500.
And don't forget,
well as the Warriors.
The Warriors, yeah, that's the most surprising. The Warriors are 3-7. That's insane.
It is because they got the same starting 5 that they had last year.
Except Clay is a year better. Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins both got paid. I mean, it's hard to imagine that punch has still residual effects going this far into the season, right?
I would think so. There's clearly something that's going. I've watched a couple of their games, and you can kind of see. Steph is still going crazy. He's still an all-star, but it just seems like the other pieces just don't seem to fit the way that they did, and I don't know if that boils down to just that team chemistry being shot. If everybody's just really quietly sick of Draymond and the stuff that he has going on, and I'm dumbfounded.
Yeah, you could. I think when you look at them, you could be, there's the reality that Klay Thompson is never going to be the Klay Thompson from 4 years ago, and he probably shouldn't be getting. He should probably be getting less minutes than he's getting now because he's no longer a defensive stopper. He's forever labeled a splash brother, but he's just not the same player he was, and he's now 2 years removed from injury. I just don't know if he ever will be. You wonder if Wiggins, sort of his whole redemption story, he was the second best player in the finals. He got a new contract with Golden State. Is he hungry still?
Right.
And you can say the same thing about Jordan Poole, where Jordan Poole got paid now. Jordan Poole's now he's not the scrappy second rounder that's trying to fight for minutes. Now he's, the man. And then you look at, Wiseman, Kuminga, Moody, this supposed, second great threesome of Golden State players, and they just haven't quite. None of them have really popped. I think the way that they thought one of them would have popped by now. But 3 wins is insane because the Lakers have 2 wins somehow. So.
Yeah. It's a really interesting process. And is it one of those things where if you are on the Warriors, you know how long of a haul this is, and you're just like, hey, listen, first 2 months of the season, we're just going to pace ourselves, and then we're going to get to our stride? Like, is that how you approach it if you've been a long time veteran and have seen the ups and downs of the team? Like, I don't know. Like, is that maybe what it is? Just a mindset thing of like we can turn this on whenever we want to?
I think when you look at the standings, though, like Phoenix, let's throw Utah out because Utah clearly wants the greatest French player of all time to come play for them next year. I don't know why they're 7-3, but I'm sure they'll do everything they can to start sucking. But you got Phoenix, Memphis, Portland, Denver, Dallas, the Pelicans, the Clippers. Those teams are all trying to win right now, The Spurs obviously aren't. The Timberwolves have put everything in. They're trying to win right now. So that's 8 teams. The Lakers technically are trying to win right now. I know they're not very good at it, but, that is their ultimate goal. And then the Sacramento Kings put in the Warrior. I mean, if you're the Warriors, like, you don't want to give all those good teams, like, this big of a head start. Right? I mean, you're almost 5 games back already. And 5 is a lot,
It's a tough thing too. The one thing I try to catch myself on is, whether it be, sports that typically have more games, baseball or, basketball, trying to look at things from a standpoint of like, okay, so the Warriors just their last 10 games they went 3-7. If that 10-game streak happened in the middle of the season, are we freaking out? The beginning of the season always gets so much more attention because we don't necessarily have any indication as to how there's no perspective, so to speak.
Right.
So is it one of those things too where like, this is easily turned around? I definitely agree with your point. You don't want to necessarily give people a big head start, but how is it if is it more concerning because it's the beginning of the season? And are we overvaluing it for that same reason?
Probably a little bit. They don't look like, for a team that just won the finals and is bringing back this stacked team, and the only real thing that happened in the offseason was the Draymond punch, which was terrible. But I mean, it seems like people are over it, and it just seems like they're just really, really not doing it. Again, Utah is probably the biggest surprise. I have no idea how they're 7-3.
Yeah, and I bet you Danny Ainge is flipping out every day because this is not going the way that he had planned.
They're kind of doing the Seattle Seahawks plan. We'll give away our best player, get a bunch of draft picks. Oh, but we're winning now.
Right.
What? Yeah, and then shout out to the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's still the best thing on social media in all of sports. He's fantastic. He gets everything.
Oh, really? I haven't seen any of his. Like, I haven't followed him, so I guess I got to pick him up.
He's incredible. Yeah, after they beat the Sixers, he's like, "I'm going to go get cheesesteak." He's like, "Whiz, whiz." But he does it in this very like he knows, but he's doing it in this like very charmful, playful way. Like watching him try Oreos for the first time. Like he's a delight, and he seems like. And again, in a world full of Kevin Durant, it's nice to see a Giannis who's like, I get to play basketball for a living, and I am happy as can be.
Giannis is one of those superstars that I absolutely love. And even though I want to beat the Bucks, I want the Celtics to beat the Bucks every time they're playing, I absolutely. I heard one of the best stories about an athlete. And it was about Giannis, and it was his rookie year. He was basically taking all of his money and sending it back home.
Yeah.
To his family, and so much so that like he couldn't afford a taxi one day for practice, and he was running to practice, and it was some like crazy distance that he lived away from the stadium. and on the way, like this older couple like pulls up alongside the road, and they're like, "Hey, do you need a ride somewhere?" And he ended up kind of befriending this older couple who turns out they were like Bucks fans, and but like him having that just willingness to, or ability to check himself and be like, okay, I'm doing what's important for me, supporting my family. I get to do this job, have this career, which is awesome. But I don't necessarily need all these things around me, these material things. Like, it just shows you, like, he's like a guy that anybody can root for. To your point, especially when we hear so much about, so many athletes who make it tough to root for them, even if you root for their team.
And again, I don't mean to dismiss, like, I'm sure, Giannis has bad times and Kevin Durant is maybe going through some stuff, but it just seems like it's nice sometimes when people are successful to see them actually being happily being success. It's like, so there is a point. If I get to do what I want to do, like someday, like we're trying to do, like maybe, I'll be happy as opposed to, I just, like I said, he's delightful. And I mean, when you look at Jokic, Luka, Giannis, I mean, they all sort of have a similar mentality on some level.
Yeah, and is it the fact that they're all from overseas, that give them an ability to enjoy.
You can even do. You can throw Embiid in that mix because Embiid is a pretty likable guy too.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. And even in his press conferences post game, and Philadelphia's been through, the 76ers have been through the ringer over the past couple of years in terms of like, things going on with the team, needing to have, show up for the press conference after every game, win or lose. I haven't ever heard of Embiid like losing his mind.
No.
He seems to be pretty even keeled.
And the more that time passes, you think less and less about what he said about Ben Simmons at the end of the playoffs. Because it's like, maybe he just had to at that point. He and Doc Rivers. Like, they were just like, I don't know what else to do. Like, we tried every way possible to get this guy on the same page with us, and he's just not there. Because, he just hasn't been.
I'm shocked by the Cavs, to be quite honest. I did not think that the Donovan Mitchell thing was going to make that big of a difference. Clearly tells you what I know when it comes to
well, Garland and Mobley, just getting better and better. Like, that's a really, really good team. Like, really good. I don't know if they can contend this year, but that's a great team.
Yeah, definitely. They're sitting 7-1, I think.
They're sitting 7-1. And your Celtics are nice 6-3, right where they want to be. Right?
Yeah.
Third place in the East right now.
With, coming off the bombshell right before the season started in terms of like Udoka's getting sat, suspended, whatever. Not knowing what was going to happen. Like, it seems like the gentleman who's I don't want to mispronounce his name, so I'm just going to say, like, the guy who stepped in has done an amazing job keeping that team focused. And quite honestly, watching Jason Tatum, it's amazing how much better of a player he is versus a couple years ago. Like, he just will not if he wants to get to the rim, he's going to get to the rim. And that was not his game early on. But it has been interesting and awesome to watch his game evolve to where he's just going to be, he won't be stopped.
No. And I hope Jaylen Brown gets all the love in the streets possible. Like when he's walking around the streets of Boston.
I think so. He's beloved. At least anybody that I talk to that's a Celtics fan understands how important he is to the team. Everybody out here was, at least fan-wise, was irate when there was the conversation about him being part of the trade for Durant. Nobody wanted to have any part of that. So he definitely gets a lot of love. At least with the fans that I've spoken to.
That's good because he's had like 2 straight years of him being like, we trade, the national media, talking head media being like, we trade blah blah blah. Jaylen Brown in a second couldn't hang up the phone fast enough, and it's like, no, he's really awesome and he's a good fit, and it's a good thing. So
Yeah, I was definitely worried because I want to say his contract is up after this year, or next year is the last year of his current contract, something like that. But I was saying like I'm worried that that Brad Stevens ruined that relationship because it didn't seem like. And granted, we don't know what conversations
right,
go on day to day at the facility. My hope is that Stevens and other people from the organization would have been like, listen, that was put out there. We obviously checked into it, but once they mentioned that you were part of the deal, it was a no deal for us. Like my hope is that that's kind of the thing that was said. But yeah, I remember everybody out this way was freaking out once they heard that Jaylen Brown had tweeted out shaking my head, you know, SMH as a response to these trade rumors, and we're like, that doesn't sound good.
exactly. Well, we talked for quite a bit. We'll talk some more next week. But before we do you have any food or entertainment moments for us this week?
Well, food wise, I was lucky enough to be down your way, right? To attend your wedding. Thank you so much. That was awesome. It was such a fun time. But while my wife and I were down that way, we stopped at this restaurant right off of the square in the French Quarter in New Orleans, called Stanley. No S, just Stanley. I think just one of them. And it was the best breakfast I have possibly ever had out.
Oh my!
It was amazing, and my wife got this. They call it an omelet sandwich, but it was so much more to it than that. That was really really good. I just got 3 pancakes, but they were like the biggest, tastiest pancakes. One had blueberries in it, one had walnuts, and one had bananas. And then they put a scoop of vanilla ice cream on the top, like freshly made vanilla ice cream on the top.
Okay.
If you're ever down by the French Quarter, look for Stanley. It's on the corner, and highly recommend it. So that's food wise. Entertainment, I would say if you have not watched Welcome to Wrexham, you should definitely make the time to do it. It's only, I want to say, 16 episodes, so kind of like a good middle, not 22 like some of those long ones, and not 10. So it's a good length. Most of the episodes are 30 minutes, so they go by pretty quick. But it's like an amazing show. And, didn't know anything about Rob McElhenney.
I love him from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I didn't. So. I had never seen, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I didn't know anything about him. Obviously, I think most people know Ryan Reynolds.
I think so.
But the show really doesn't center around them. The show really centers around the people of this small, town or small city in it's Welsh town, in Wales, in Wales, United Kingdom, and it's just really really cool. It kind of, you can really connect with a lot of the fans, in terms of fandom for your own teams.
Okay.
And it's just a really cool process to get to understand it, and get to understand, what's going on over there. But I would highly recommend it. Really well done. Good pace with the shows themselves. They move along quick. They're entertaining. There's a good balance between touching your heart and making you laugh. And I love the fact that it's not completely centered on Rob and Ryan. They're obviously important to it, but it doesn't overwhelm the story about the people from Wrexham. It's actually really cool.
That's very nice. I'll give my food moment, and mine comes with a slight caveat. I live in New Orleans, obviously. And one of the reasons I ended up delaying our podcast recording for half an hour is Maria found out that Ubig, which is Hubig, they brought their hand pies back and they were selling them in a bank parking lot.
That's what I had to wait for?
That's what you had to wait for. So we went, and they had a jazz band blasting music. People were buying them by like the box in the bushel. It's like they were corn. When we were walking back, the streetcar literally stopped and asked a woman, "How much are they? Where are they at?" So they are a huge deal down here. I did eat one. They're good. I mean, it's just, if you had a Hostess pie back in the day, like when you were a kid,
Yeah.
it's a homemade Hostess pie, basically.
Is it still warm?
No. They're all packaged up in that, like, crinkly packaging, just like the Hostess. It reminded me so much of Hostess. But, I mean, it was very good. I just felt like, New Orleans is a very unique city where people get very excited, but, like, there was lines. People were buying as many as they could. Jazz bands, people screaming, going excited. And I was like, I can't wait. I mean, so part of it, your expectations get to a certain level, and you're like, well, can you possibly live up to my expectations?
Right.
But they are very good. It's just I've never, I felt like that was a food moment on some weird level where it's like, yeah, this is people are into this, and I had one. So
Well, it definitely sounds like one of those things where if you happen to hear about it, like you have to go try them.
yeah, I mean, like I said, she was excited. When I saw on social media, I was like, oh, this is the place you're always talking about, and they're back, and she was like, oh my god, and we went out of our way to. And like I said, there was just so many people. So everyone was so excited. And I guess my entertainment moment, what would it be this week? Oh, I rewatched Attack the Block. Are you familiar with Attack the Block? It's
I've heard of it.
John Boyega's first film. It's essentially like there's a bunch of like, sort of kids that are into, they live in the projects in London and aliens start attacking. And these kids fight back. But it's like a really enjoyable romp. So it's definitely worth watching if you're into those kind of movies.
Kind of like a modern day, what was that? Red Dawn, but with aliens instead of Russians.
I think you can make that out. Yeah, it's got more humor in it too. But yeah. And it's one of those movies where all the the young teenagers, because John Boyega, I think, is like close to 18 when he's filming this. But they just did a really nice job of casting on everybody. I guess so you could argue, like today, like Stranger Things. Like,
Okay.
they did a really nice job of everybody who's in the movie is likable. So then it's sort of like, oh, well, this is fun. Yeah.
Attack the Block.
Attack the Block. And I think it's like 5 or 6 years old. So,
Okay.
but
I gotta check that out.
yeah. And it's really well written for the type of movie that it is too. So that always helps.
Something we very much appreciate as aspiring writers.
We do. I think that's about it for today, right?
Yeah, that's. I think that's what we had, and unless there was something else that came up last minute.
No, I think that's about it. Enjoy your football this week. Next week at the very end, just sort of like the Steeler Minute, we might do our Fantasy Minute because we've been in a Dynasty League for a couple of years and we never get to talk about it to random people. So we'll put it at the very end of the podcast. So we'll tell you when it's happening and there'll be nothing after that. So if you want to turn off, because nobody likes listening to people talk about fantasy, but I'm going to make people listen to us talk about fantasy anyway.
It's going to be super engrossing.
It is.
It's going to be fun. This is a whole lifestyle.
We'll be very passionate about it. We'll be explaining the benefits of a franchise keeper league. So,
Yep.
and again, like I said, that'll be at the very end, and we'll give you a warning when it's coming, so you can turn it off at that point if you don't want to listen. But I want to talk, so
They're going to be missing out if they do.
they do, yeah. All right, so until next week.
All right, sounds good.